Good morning, everybody. I'm Henry from the Kent and Vics Chamber of Commerce. Um, I'm joined by Dan Hulbert, the Director of Building on a Solid Foundations. How are you this morning, Dan?
I'm very good, thank you. It's good to be here.
Fantastic, fantastic. So today, obviously, with Business Bites, we're going to have a presentation on practical presenting. This should last roughly 20 to 25 minutes, and then we will have a short session of question and answer for Dan. If anyone has any questions. So if you do have any questions that crop up throughout the session, feel free to just put these in the chat and then we'll get those all kind of answered and attended to after the event. But without further ado, I'm going to pass you over to Dan Hulbert. And yeah, good to go.
Excellent, thank you. Thanks, Henry. So as you can see, we're talking about practical presenting today. What I'll do is just give you a quick welcome and say hello and a bit more about what we're actually talking about and a little bit about myself in a second. But yeah, Henry, thanks for putting this on. It's a great opportunity. Really enjoy being here. And thanks for everybody that's turned up to listen to it. I'll try and give you as much value as I can within the time that we've got. But yeah, as Henry said, any questions, if you don't mind, just putting them in the chat and we'll sort them out at the end. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Dan Hulbert and my company is Building on Solid Foundations. I've been in the construction industry for just over 20 years. In that time, I've started on the tools, worked as a contractor, and then worked my way up to sort of project management and more consultancy role, which I do now. I also working on qualifying as a coach to help contractors become better businesses. And I also train some property investors around how to minimize the risk and maximize the results within refurbishments within their property journey. So that's a little bit about me, but I've been presenting for many years. I was just saying to Henry, like that's the days of 60-second pitches at breakfast meetings and stuff, and I absolutely hated it. But practice makes progression, as I say, not perfection. So over the years, I've just learned more, put better practice in place, and yeah, that's what I'm sort of sharing with you today. Some insights and things that I use, and give you some good tools to go away and showcase your businesses, really. So I'll jump straight into it. Red flags in presenting that drive me mad. And this can be online or it can be in person when you're actually in front of people. But some of the red flags for me is death by bullet points. You know, look, sometimes you do need them. Like, I'm not going to say you don't ever use them, but the problem is you lose people and you get bored and you don't really pay much attention to them. But I do understand why people use them, because it is a bit of a prompt, a reminder, as I'm saying on the text here, to give you an idea of what you're talking about next. But I just think it's really boring. It looks boring. It's not really fun. So try not to use bullet points too much. The other thing is, don't use too small a font, because I've seen presentations when I've been in a room full of 200 people and they're using fonts this size. You can't read it. You just can't even see it, let alone understand what it's about. And you'll see slides with bullet points like this all over, and you just get lost, and really you kind of lose interest because you're not paying attention. And what you want to be doing is grabbing the audience's attention and, you know, keeping them involved and interactive. This is another pet hate of mine: stretching images or reducing the size. Please don't do this. It just looks absolutely awful. It just looks really dated, and it just, like, for me, it just shows you don't kind of care about the imaging and what your business looks like. That's my personal opinion. So try not to stretch images and move them about and manipulate them without doing it properly. And I'll explain some of that in the green flags, which is what I'll come on to next. So these are the things that really counteract what I've just said don't do. This is something I think you should do, is do more roadmaps and visual metaphors and get people engaged in the visual. So this is something I do for training for property investors. This is a roadmap that I put together over the years of being involved in property, and it gives them, you know, an understanding of, they can see where they start and they can see where they finish and all the bits in between. It doesn't give all the information, but it gives them a roadmap and an understanding of what the journey would be if they decided to go for it, and then you can explain through it. I just think visual aids are much better than just like a bullet point. I could bullet point this and put practical property system and put position, plan, profile, and it's just not going to look as good. So this, if you can get it as visual as possible, not saying you have to do this style, but just a style that fits your business and what you offer. Also, something over the years, use really bold and universal fonts. I stick with Arial because it's on every computer and everywhere in the world. My logos that you can see in the top corners and bottom corners, they're actually embedded within the presentation. So they're images. So it's actually every slide is duplicated. The bits in the middle aren't. So they're the bits that we adjust. But if you use a presentation and you use a font that's your font within your business, that's a special font for you, if you download that presentation, say, for example, I sent it to Henry and he needed to use the presentation on his computer, it might not have that font. So then it will reformat based on whatever it thinks is the closest to it on that computer. So then it could mess up your slides. So you need to double check that. So the best thing to do, keep it simple, just use a standard font, like a universal font. And then with images, rather than stretching them, this is simple stuff you can do. Use professional photography where you can. These are images of HMO, a house of multiple occupancy conversion that I did for a client a few years ago. Professional photos, and then use some of the formats you can use in Google, in PowerPoint, where you can maybe shadow it or reflect it or put a shadow behind it, and just makes it stand out a little bit more, makes it look a bit more professional. You can be a bit more visual and push it in with animation and stuff if you want to get technical with it. And with PowerPoint, if you really get into it and do a bit of training around it, you'll see that there's a lot of techniques you can use on that to make it look amazing. So just go on TikTok and have a look at PowerPoints. They'll give you loads of freebies on there. Little tip. So that's just the do's and don'ts. They're just simple things that that over the years that I just have come across and I try and do for myself. The next thing is sort of like a presentation flow, and just to give you each time you put a presentation together, try and keep it to this flow. And it's a simple step. So with this, you can see I've already done some gratitude, said thank you to everybody. I've put some clarity around the presentation, what I'm talking about. I've given you some authority, credibility of why I'm the person to talk to you about presenting. I've given you some problems, so the red flags. I've given you solutions, so the green flags. And I'm now also giving you the how. So this is the flow. So this is, you can see this presentation, it fits this format, and you'll see as we move along, it'll be exactly the same. There'll be an opportunity, next steps, and essence of the presentation. So try and keep to a flow, because then it just gives you an easier way. Then you don't need all the bullet points, you see. You don't need, if you're really good at what you do, you don't need bullet points to able to remind people what you do. What you need is a formula. So this is the formula to help you flow with your presentation, because you know what your authority is, you know what you're talking about, you know what the problem is within your industry, and you know what the solution is. You know how to deliver it. So now all you're doing is following these steps, but you're doing it in presentation form, and it just makes things a lot clearer and easier for people to understand, like who you're presenting to. The other thing is just a reminder, and this is the visual for me. My company is called Building on Solid Foundations, and this is a foundation. So I keep it visual. It's a bit more interactive, but it also is a visual aid and helps people understand. So I always say, try and keep these elements within your presentation, keeping it visual, sharing your journey. And with your journey, make sure that there's stories that relate, that are about you and your business, because that relatability is massive. You'd be surprised how much people really relate to people when you tell them stories around what it is you're doing in your journey. So stories, educational, interactive if you can. And there's obviously a theme to it, which I'll go through each one of these as the next part of the presentation. But ultimately, and most importantly, me and Henry mentioned this before, just be yourself. make sure that you're being yourself and bringing your own personality to it. Everything that I'm telling you today, take what resonates with you and leave what doesn't, and just make sure that you come up with your own conclusion as well, because what I do doesn't work for other people, but it's a good platform and it's a good foundation as a way of doing presenting. But you might be able to tweak it and change it slightly to how you are as an individual. So make sure you're doing it the way that your personality comes across with it. So the theme's really simple. I've not done anything other than this slide. The theme is, what is it you're talking about? So today we're talking about practical presenting. The theme for me is my company building on solid foundations. So I try and keep my brand and the essence of me and my business within the presentation, even though it is more about presenting than it is building stuff and refurbing stuff. But you can see there's a theme to the whole presentation. So try and make sure that you've got that theme running through, because otherwise it can look a bit disjointed and underprepared. Stories are massively important. People buy into the story. And I share this in one of my presentations of Harrow Road. And it's actually a story that ended up not being so great for me profit-wise, but I don't mind sharing it because there's lots of lessons in it. And I want to help budding developers not go through the same problem that I did. And we got this, just a very quick story. We got this sent to us through the network that I used to run. I used to run a network called the Property Vault. Kaz was actually really helpful when I ran it, and she helped promote it through Chamber. We ran it for about 4 years, and we had sort of 80 odd people every month turn up. We also had a podcast, which we'd done just under 100,000 downloads. And because of that network and that presence and that profile that I built, we got this sent to us through a solicitor connection. And basically we worked with the owner to see if long story short, to see if we could develop the property, because unfortunately she had no insurance and the house caught on fire and she had no way of refurbing it. So we worked together to help her fund the build. But rather than rebuild this or convert this back, because it was so old and so badly damaged, we agreed with her to put 2 houses on it. But we didn't sign it up for long enough. So the deal was, we'd sign it up, we'd get planning permission on what's called an option agreement for 18 months, but we didn't do it long enough. The option agreement ran out and the planning came through 2 months later. So we actually lost out on the deal. She went off with someone else and they built it separately. So we didn't actually make any money on it. We actually lost money on it because we spent all the money on the planning. But this is what it eventually turned into with someone who actually did develop it. The planning was there. They tweaked the plan slightly and then they built it, and that's what it now looks like. And that's what we designed. But I learned a lot of lessons. So I was a motivated buyer. Because it was one of my first developments, I wanted to do it, I wanted to get it done. I kind of bent over backwards to say yes to whatever her needs were and not what my own were, and how the deal would actually work and be structured for me. I should have gone with my gut, because she was quite vindictive and she was going behind our back with other people as well, which we found out later. And I did feel that the trust was a little bit not there. And also, the partners I was working with weren't really aligned with the vision of what we were trying to do. So they kind of bowed out quite quickly. So that's the story behind it. And it helps people understand who I am and how it went on. In the presentation, it's a lot longer than that. And I break down the plans and talk about it as a real case study. But it's important to share this stuff. It's not always the good. It's people want to see the other side of it as well, and who you are as an individual. So that's stories. Then journey. So what is your journey? Where have you been? Where do you want to go? What is it you're trying to do with the business? I do it with timelines. This is one of the examples I use. So when I started on the tools, how I become a contractor, and I break this down, and then I use slides to break down each section and show them things that I'd done at the time and how I did it. But again, it's a flow of the presentation within the overview of the flow of the entire structure. So I also do one like this with future plans, where I want to be next year, 5 years, 10 years, etc. So it just gives people a clear, this is better than a bullet point, right? You put a bullet point, started on the tools, full-time in construction, contracts, started a contracting business, etc., etc., etc. It just looks boring. It's not as interactive and it's not as engaging when you start talking about it. And then visual. Again, being in my industry is quite good, really, to be fair, because we're in property, construction, refurbishments. But when I'm presenting my business, I'm showing case studies of projects that I've done. This was a HMO conversion. This was like the before. With this project, I designed, this was a concept to completion. So I found the project, I designed it for the client. I managed the project, got all the contractors in, right the way through to her handing the keys over to a letting agent to manage it. This is what it looked like afterwards. Again, nice professional photos, shows the finished result. Also put during photos in, so you can see we've insulated, we've done the project properly. This is good not only for building control can see it, but also for your portfolio to show people what you've done. And then this is the finished result. And so again, it's important to have those visual aids to share with people. And then lastly, like one of the really good ones is try and be interactive. So this is actually that project, and this is the before plans that I put together for the client. Just basic plans, just to sort of show what it was and how we were doing it. And what I would do with this is I would then give this to people to say, right, go away and have a look. This is the first floor, this is the ground floor, how you can then convert this into a 6-bed HMO. There was a third floor as well, but for some reason it got missed off of the slides, so I do apologise. But yeah, you can then I'll give them this, they'll go away, they'll play around with it. And if you're online, they can go into groups and different breakout rooms. If you're interactive in front of them, you can have it all printed off and they can do it on the paper. So it's just about giving them that, because not everybody's visual, not everybody's audio, there's the kinesthetic side. So everyone's got a different way of learning. So I try and add all of this stuff into presentations, so everybody's got a bit of something to keep them interactive. And then then finally educational. So this is one from, obviously you've got to adapt this to your business, but mine's like, do you know your ABCs of property? So there's only 3 things you can do in property. You can add value, you can buy below market value, which is BMV. So when you're using abbreviations and shortening things and all this sort of stuff, always explain what it is, because not everybody will know your language within your industry. And then C is change of use. So that's going from commercial to residential, or residential to commercial, or land to new build, etc. So you break all these things down, but it's a visual, it's educational, and you can make this quite interactive. Just this one slide, you can make also, how do you add value? So you make it interactive, you get the audience to come back to you about how you make add value to it. This is another one, again, building on solid foundations. So it's a triangle. In property, compounding and building wealth, you use cash flow first, you build your cash flow, then you compound your cash flow into profit, which is bigger projects, developments, reinvest those profits, and then reinvest those profits into longer term assets to create a longer term wealth. So you're using your own profits to create profit, hence compounding. So this again is an interactive thing. What could you do to create cash flow in your business? Then how can you use that profits from your cash flow business to then create bigger profits within bigger projects or bigger things that you want to do? And then how can you do that and create assets, longer term, long formed assets? So this is, again, educational, interactive, visual, you can break it all down, and you can not bullet point these, you can create animations where only one comes up at the same time, or they all come up, or you can do it however you want to do it and what works for you. Oh, there we go. So in essence with this is be yourself. Make sure, obviously, you know your industry, so make sure it relates to your industry. Make sure you're following the flow. Always say thank you at the beginning to whoever's brought you on to give you the presentation. If it's your own presentation and you're doing it for your own in-house, say thank you for people turning up and sharing the time with you. But just follow this simple flow, and it will, every time, it's a very, very simple way to do it. So you can see that I've used this flow within this presentation. Obviously, I've not gone into major opportunities and stuff like that too much because it's not about selling my commercial business today. It's about helping the chamber and help you guys with presenting. So again, this is in essence, this is my Solid Foundation for presenting. I use Solid Foundation for all sorts of training and exercises within property, within construction. I work with homeowners, and I help them with a structure and show them how to build their extensions or their home improvements on Solid Foundations. And I use these metaphors and these visuals to show how I work as a person and how we work as a company, so that they get a better understanding. Using the same flow, I would talking to a client to try and onboard a client and win their business. So that's it. That's everything. There's a lot to take in. I appreciate, but yeah, if you've got any questions now's the time to ask them. Or if you've got any insights or anything that you want to share, that'd be great. So thank you very much.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Dan. I think that was a very, very useful presentation, not only for everyone that's here, but for myself as well. I know that there's a lot of value in that, and I think it's important to discuss this topic and help people to grow with their presenting. So if anyone does have any questions, like Dan said, please put them in the chat. Equally, feel free to unmute and just ask away. It's no problem at all. I actually do have a quick question to kick things off anyway. So just in that Paul's got a question as well. We'll come to you in just a second, Paul. But is there a tool that you'd say within sort of PowerPoint that you think is quite underutilized when presenting?
Yeah, so I've not used PowerPoint for a while because I moved over to Mac, and I've been on Google for a couple of years now. So I haven't used PowerPoint for a number of years. But Google's version of PowerPoint, if you like, is not as advanced. But this is what I use TikTok for. But if you go on there and search PowerPoint presentation tips, go on there and have a look at that, because there's some great tips on there. There's a button called Morph, which is just unreal, and the way it actually interacts with the audience and how it changes the presentation is unbelievable. Like, you can do very simple things but make them look unbelievable. So morphing slides takes a bit of time to use it, and it's a bit more detailed, but once you know how to do it, it's really straightforward. Like anything, it's hard to understand it to start with, but I would definitely, if you're Microsoft users, PowerPoint is there's lots of tools on there that are underutilized. I don't use as many because, as I say, I've got Google, and I keep it quite simple because construction and property can be overcomplicated as it is. So I try, and that's my whole visual aid, is to keep it simple. But you can make it look unbelievable with some of the tools on Microsoft. So yeah, definitely go and have a look at TikTok videos, but don't get caught in the loop of just watching every video that comes up.
That's the danger. That's the danger.
Yeah.
Paul, I can see you've got your hand up. Would you like to unmute and ask your question?
Yeah, it was just, I think, funnily enough, actually, Dan, as you started talking about using all the tools that are available, I think we can sometimes slip into a bit of a habit of using the things that we know. And then, of course, time goes by, technology moves quite quick. So I think that was a really useful reminder at the end, actually, after the presentation, that it's good to try and keep yourself up to date with stuff. I know that certainly I could do with a more of a refresh on the dynamics of PowerPoint than perhaps I've been relying on. The other thing was I was looking for something in there which I may have missed, because at one point I had to catch a ladybird and throw it out the window. So apologies, I dropped down for a minute. But two things that I learned from my old corporate days were to very much to know your audience, if you can. Sometimes you can't, but if you can know the audience and then tailor the message accordingly. I guess that if you're doing a generic presentation like you're doing today, that's a slightly different thing. But if it is like you were talking about your property network, I suspect that you really did know your audience there, and therefore the message would have been targeted. Yeah, no,
that's a great insight there, mate, because with property. So one of the first things I do before I say hello and welcome, I actually do a raise your hand section and say, right, who's here for the first time? Okay, right, who's just started in property investing? Who's got 2 or 3 properties? Who's got more than 5? And then I'll get an gauge from just who's putting a hand up. So then I can, with my experience, I can kind of gauge what sort of things I can add to the presentation from talking to them. The presentation is the presentation, but I can add and take away little bits, because sometimes people would be like, I remember going to my first property network and talking about HMOs and buy-to-lets and BTLs and all this, and I'm like, well, BTL, that's a sandwich, isn't it? So, do you know what I mean? So it's just all these different things that you have to try and remember that you're a bit further on than everyone else. So yeah, that's a great shout there. So yeah, thank you for bringing that.
Perfect. We've got a few more minutes going on the session. So does anyone else have any questions at all? Like I said, feel free to unmute, type it in the chat, or raise your hand.
They're just so stunned by the excellence of my presentation.
That is it.
There is one other thing. I'm trying to buy time for someone else. Okay, listen, team, I'm taking one here for the team. Someone jump in a minute, stick your hand up, get me off the hook. One thing I've realised is that I've got an old laptop, and I don't, thank you very much, Sally, you're a star. And therefore my configuration doesn't allow for virtual backgrounds. I need to upgrade my laptop. I think the environment behind you is quite important, would you say, Dan?
Yeah, so funnily enough, I don't like virtual backgrounds as in digital ones, because I don't know, they cut your ears off. It just, I don't know. I don't think they look as professional. This is actually a screen.
Okay.
And I have this up all the time because I do, I'm just about to relaunch a podcast called One Brick at a Time, which will be a YouTube as well. So having this, and this cost me like 60 quid, and it just sits in my office, and I just put my computer in front of it. So I just think it looks better. It looks a bit more real, and there's lights above it, etc., that I've put in extra. But you don't have to go to that extent. But I just think with virtual backgrounds, it just looks a bit, the blurred backgrounds. I think they're all right, but I think this just makes it look a little bit more, and it's relevant to my industry as well. So
background is important.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. Cool, thanks.
Yeah, long short of it.
Perfect. And we've got Sally, you've got a question as well, if you'd like to unmute to ask your question.
Sally Ann really likes herself because she's got a background of herself.
Well done, Sally Ann.
You just got to unmute yourself. Henry, can you unmute her?
Oh,
there we go.
There we go.
There we go. I've always done events, but I've now completed my degree in hotel and hospitality management. I had to do quite a lot of PowerPoints as part of my assignments. It was a lot of fun. To much extent, I've decided to stay as an undergraduate. I do not feel like doing my level 6. I'm a very practical person. I'm a very hands-on person. And we found when I was doing PowerPoints, I wanted to throw the little clicker out the window, talk with my hands, physically show people photographs on my phone. And what I've lately done on social media, because I do a lot on social media now, I go to great events. I've been at Voyage, at podcast, I've met celebrities. So my content is kind of changing all the time. Like there's different weddings I go to. So I'm looking at the PowerPoint and thinking, well, that's outdated already. Thinking that I've got to update it, or I'd rather physically show people physical favours from the last wedding or what the last gift bag was and have it in my bag, rather than have a PowerPoint presentation. Because like you, I hate bullet points. A lot of agencies are helping me get work are like, oh, we want more bullet points in your CV, and I want to poke their eyes out because it takes up a lot of space when I can easily have a couple of sentences. It catches their attention rather than wasting space with bullet points. So what would you recommend to someone who has a lot of physical product? With you, you're planning a physical product for them and you're able to give some examples. With me, a lot of the time I'm able to give them an idea of the finished product. It's a lot of wedding events, you'll see physical products. They're not all doing PowerPoint presentations. So what would you recommend in that situation?
So I can only sort of give you things that I do, like with physical, so people can physically see. So when I go to events, especially with property investors, I take all the tools that I use and I pass them around, and people can muck about and look at them and get a bit more interactive. Off the back of the PowerPoints, if you like, off the presentation, I would invite them to sites. I'd say come along site if you ever want. If you're in the area, come along. Like I can do certain dates, and then I would organise that with and drop it into an email. Say if you're interested. Not only are you then prospecting and getting potential leads, you're also then creating a segmented audience, so you can email and say, "This is what I'm doing. Come and have a look." What is it you actually do? Sorry.
I work events. I also work from home as well, because that's how lockdown happened. But I do all types of different events. So for me to keep it simple, like you said, know the audience. I worked at Barcode just recently. I'm a personal license holder. I do weddings. I've got qualifications in various different events. I specialise knowledge. So it's a case of like you said, I have to be aware of my audience and cater it to them. You don't want me going on about weddings if I'm at a kick meeting or B&I, because they'll be more interested in what I can supply for corporate meetings.
Yeah, so I mean, I think for yourself, you need to be very visual and interactive and showcase what you do. And I get what you're saying. It could be outdated. There's new technologies, new things that you're doing. But if you don't show it at all, they're not even going to know about the old ones. So you need to kind of give them something, and you can say, look, this is something we've just done recently, but because of this, we now update it as well. So this is what we're looking to do. So try and be, I think, for your business, as visual and as possible, really, and as interactive as possible. That would just be, I don't know, off the top of my head, really. So, and if you can invite people along to events that you're potentially looking to take on as clients, or even if you're you're at B&Is or you're at physical events, you can say to people, oh, I run events. If you ever want to come along and see what we do, experience it for yourself. Invite them along if it's something that they can be invited to.
There's a lot of free ticketed ones, like if you think Excel's and things like that.
Come along as my guest, see what we do, and you can experience it for yourself.
Perfect. Thank you.
All right, no worries. Thanks for the questions. Brilliant.
That's fantastic. That brings us to the end of our session. So first of all, I'd just like to thank you all for attending today. I hope you got a lot of value out of this session. I know that I did. And equally, I'd like to just extend my thanks to Dan Hulbert as well. Dan, thank you. That was an excellent presentation and some really well answered questions. Thank you again for your time. Thank you all. If you want more information on our other events, you can find those all on our website. We've got loads of great ones coming up over the next coming weeks. And yeah, other than that, I hope you all have a great rest of your day. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Dan. Cheers, Dan.
Thanks for coming, everyone. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.